Over the next 2 weeks, I want to take you through the process of throwing, trimming and assembling a slightly different style of teapot. One with a lid that slots into the body, resting on a small internal gallery, which helps to keep it held in place when it's tipped over and poured. In this weekend's video, I'll be discussing the throwing of the different components. I'm currently in the midst of glazing hundreds of pieces, and during this time I like to have a few small making projects on the go just to keep my hands active, and to act as a break almost from the monotony of the glazing. This is the shape I'll be making. It's similar in many ways to a very old teapot I made during my time as a student. Comparatively, from a technical standpoint, this thing is really clunky and poorly made, but it has the sort of lid and gallery I want to make in this newer edition. The lid slots onto the gallery like so, and due to the height of the internal section of the lid, when it's tipped over to one side, that internal part catches as the lid begins to fall out, holding it in place. I made that teapot in 2013, and in the 12 years since, my skill has improved drastically, and I think I can make a much better rendition, technically and aesthetically, as compared to the crude vessel I've just shown you. I went through a phase of quite liking handles that looped over the top. Nowadays, I prefer them when they're made from another material, such as bamboo, wood or metal, so I'll be changing the overhanging handle into a more traditional one that springs off the body opposite the spout on the other side. As for the rest of the design of the lid, much of it will be very similar to the store jar you may have seen me throw last week, a link to which I'll leave on screen now and in the description below. This method of forming an internal gallery and throwing a lid that fits is far more time consuming and fiddly as compared to the sorts of lids I normally make. Aesthetically, it's very different. Instead of it sort of being like a hat on top of the piece, these lids are far more delicate and sit within the body. Because of this, it means I can't trim the two components together, which is one thing that makes that other method so efficient. I'll leave another link here, by the way, to a video that goes over that process, how I make a teapot in my conventional style. Visually, this is a really simple shape, but I find with very minimal ceramics, there's often nowhere to hide, especially from a functional standpoint. I'll be throwing the body portion from 500 grams of clay, with a gallery that's pressed in so that it's below the rim of the body, and it's into here the lid slots into. If you've been watching my channel for a long time, you'll know that this isn't something I've done much of, despite it being the more traditional way of making lids for teapots. It's this vertical section that's really important, as it's this that keeps it in place when it's used. For the other components, minus the handle, of course, I'll be throwing them off the hump. This is where you essentially work with a small portion of clay atop a much larger centred mound. The lid is then sliced off the wheelhead, and you can either leave enough excess in it to trim the knob from, or you can turn it flat on top and throw one on. I'll be doing both in the second part of this video. Essentially though, you're throwing this part upside down. Then once it's leather hard, you can trim much of the excess away from it and do the final shaping. The spout is also thrown like this, atop a hump of clay before being separated and lifted off. The spout for a teapot is probably the most important part, but it's really linking everything together and making all the different components work harmoniously. That's the greatest challenge. So, in this video, I'll be showing you how I throw the body, the lid, and the spout. It's a slightly more complex approach, I think, as compared to the type I normally make that sits on top of the form like this. As with this method, the lid is exposed, which means I can trim its sides and the top simply by slotting it into the body, whereas that's not really a possibility with this approach. So, let's get started. I always begin by throwing the bodies, as these dictate the size of the lid, and I also to some degree judge the size of the spouts I'll throw, based on the shape and style of the body itself. They can also be relatively complex shapes to throw, due to that delicate internal gallery, so I tend to lean towards using firm clay, and I make sure to wedge it up really well, too. As the other components are thrown off the hump, the only clay I have to prepare is the material needed for the bodies. This speeds up preparation a lot. I'm going to be trying out two different approaches to throwing the bodies of these, and more specifically, when the gallery itself is formed, as you can either throw it early or throw it towards the end. Both create different challenges, and I'll be covering those in more detail when I actually get to that point. The first thing to note is that when I throw these shapes and I pull up the walls, I'm leaving the topmost section of the wall a tiny bit thicker than I normally would. I do this as the way I form that gallery is by splitting it in two. And thus, if that upper portion of the wall is thrown really finely, there's simply no way of separating it and forming the gallery. This means that as you pull the pot up, as you start gaining height, you can begin to press down and compress the rim to keep the lip under control and to form it into a thicker band of clay that makes creating the gallery easier. As for forming the gallery itself, you can either do it at this point, which means indenting the rim and then collaring the shape in with the gallery set, which can be quite challenging, or you can do it after collaring in the top, but at that point there's not much clay underneath supporting it, as it's overhanging on the inside. This means the gallery is much more likely to flop inward if you lose control. I'll be attempting both techniques and letting you know which one I prefer. The rim is split with a wetted tool that I press into that thicker portion of clay. I try really hard to keep that split even, so an equal amount of clay is allocated to either side. That inner section will become the gallery, and that outer portion will be straightened to become the rim of the teapot. With the gallery now roughly formed, I can begin to collar it in, and as you can see, potentially two things can go wrong here. Either the two parts will fuse back together, or as these portions of clay are really quite thin, they'll begin to ripple and then collapse. You can see the rippling quite clearly here, but I was confident in the fact that I should be able to correct it afterwards, simply by compressing it from above and below, like so. With the gallery now set, I can begin tidying up the rest of the shape. To do this, I hold a sharp metal kidney where I want the profile of the pot to be, and then I press from the inside out against this sharp metal edge. Doing it this way exerts far less pressure on the pot as a whole, as compared to if you just jam the metal into the clay as hard as you could, without any internal support. The rim is given a quick chamois, and then I spend a second just very lightly straightening the gallery. At the end of the day, if it is left a tiny bit messy at this point, I don't mind, as it's going to be so much easier to tidy up once it's turned leather hard. So if you feel like the gallery is on the verge of collapse, just wait until the next stage before tidying it up. Now, what I forgot is that you have to measure both parts of the gallery for these. Not just this corner on the outside portion, but the inner opening too, of course, which is something I completely forgot and had to go back and measure very carefully later. I'm making 2 of these teapots, and I've got no doubt their openings may be different sizes, so I'm going to measure down the openings of each individually next to the teapot's body. This way, when it comes to throwing the lids, I just have to invert this measurement and throw the lid so it fits within that diameter. For this next teapot body, I'm going to angle in the top before I indent the lip to create the gallery. This means I won't have to collar in that quite delicate shape like I did previously. The top is cinched in with fingers wrapped around the lip, which helps me to keep it under control. And from here, I can separate that rim into those 2 components, the gallery and the lip of the teapot. I think this was definitely the more straightforward method. The only thing I could see going wrong is if you were to attempt this with a rim that was too thin, or with clay that's been overworked, oversaturated with water, and therefore weak. As when I was applying downward pressure, there's actually very little underneath this portion that's supporting it, whereas when forming the gallery on the other piece, there was the entirety of the walls beneath them supporting it. With this technique though, when forming it later, it felt like I had more control forming the overall shape, as I didn't have to worry about coaxing in a sort of frilly, double-walled rim. I then measured the gallery, and if I had remembered the opening too. If you find that when you lift your pots off, the galleries are distorting and losing their shape, simply throw them on bats. This way, once shaped, you're lifting the pot off on a small platform beneath it, rather than manhandling the pot itself. It was at this point that I realised I was measuring the wrong part of the gallery. It's the opening that's important, as provided the locating flange is thrown accurately enough to slot into the teapot, the portion above it that rests on the gallery can actually be thrown wider than necessary and then just trimmed back to fit at the leather hard stage. The next step is throwing all the other components, the lids and the spouts, all of which I'm going to throw from a single lump of clay using a technique called throwing off the hump. Here, the mass of clay is sort of like a conveyor belt. You centre the entire mass but only ever work on a small portion at the very top. Here, at the top, you centre a small mass which I segment off. This way I have a sort of limited amount of material to work with. For the lids, I throw a very small bowl with a thick rim which I then separate into 2 parts, the vertical section being the part that will slot inside the body of the teapot, and the horizontal flange being the section that will sit atop the gallery. I then measured the opening of the teapot invert the calipers so they come into this measurement from the outside, and then I throw this vertical section so that it slots in between these. As you can see, this horizontal section is probably a touch wider than it will eventually be, but there's absolutely no harm throwing it larger than need be, as I will of course be able to trim this section back until it fits perfectly. I then create quite a large undercut, as this makes it easy to wire off and creates a really solid surface from which I can lift this component off from. I want to try two things with the lids I'm making. With one of them, I'm going to trim it flat and then throw the knob on top of that. And with the other variant, I'm going to leave lots more material on the underside of it. This way, once it turns leather hard, I can simply trim and reveal the knob from all that excess clay that's purposefully left on the bottom, which is actually the top, I suppose, as I'm throwing the lid upside down at this stage. Whenever I'm making new shapes I'm potentially unfamiliar with, I tend to make extra components just in case I need them, as there's nothing worse than ruining a lid and then realising you don't have a backup. The same goes for the spouts. In fact, they're still one of the components I always struggle with the most, as I never feel like they're fine and narrow enough for the teapot itself, and in fact that's one thing I've been trying to change recently when producing teapots. I'm leaving plenty of material on the bottom of this one, meaning I should be able to trim a knob from the excess that's left here, meaning that I'd trim away everything apart from this section here. As due to the lid being inset, it has to have some kind of handle from which you can pluck it out from, without of course having to tip the vessel upside down in order for the lid to fall into your hands, which is something you obviously cannot do when it's full of scalding hot tea. With all the lids thrown, I can now move on to making the spouts. These start out a lot like the lids do. I open up the form and stretch out the base, leaving plenty of clay in the rim. I then begin to throw this section up and inwards. And initially, I don't worry about making it really thin. I'm just trying to form the approximate tapering cylinder I'm after. Throwing spouts involves a lot of collaring in, and you'll find that if you're doing this with clay that hasn't been wedged or centered properly, you'll end up with really severe undulations in the rim, as any disparity is focused onto a smaller and smaller point. I then insert a wooden dowel into the opening and begin throwing the clay up against that, and it's at this point that I begin to really thin the walls out as the clay is collared up. The opening is obviously much more narrow than my fingertip, so from a dowel I switch to using a short metal rod instead. Pressing the clay against this also leaves the interior shape lovely and smooth. And then once I'm happy with the approximate shape, I smooth the rim to a really crisp finish with the chamois leather. And then I begin to sort of carve away material from the outside. I hold this curved kidney in such a way that only a really small portion of the metal is making contact, and I glide it down the outside very carefully, removing a few millimeters of width from the side as I go. The outside edge of the tip is then rounded, just so it isn't sandy and rough. And then I carve away a groove at the bottom, which simply creates a more defined end point, and it creates a guide of sorts through which I'll be able to glide the wire through more easily and evenly. It's then very gently plucked off the wheelhead and set aside. The hump below is then recentered and pressed up, and I clasp a small section at the top to segment it off, and this portion itself is then centered and then thrown into the spout. The more you practice, the easier it is to segment off a similar amount of weight each time, and it's this that makes replicating shapes off the hump easier. At the same time, when making these spouts, I really don't mind if they are slightly different, as ultimately they're going to be cut up and changed quite a lot when attached to the teapot itself. In fact, I reckon about 50% of the shape you see here is eventually removed. I think the hardest thing is getting the curve right, as the path it follows can change a lot, and the shape you need is really dictated by the shape of the body itself. If there's something you've never made before, I really recommend just sitting down and throwing dozens and dozens and dozens of them, as you don't have to weigh out individual lumps. They're really easy things to practice, and it helps not to be too precious either. If the shape isn't right, simply squash it and try again. There's one trap most beginners fall into when first making spouts, and that's throwing them too wide. If the diameter of the spout is too wide, when you pour liquid through it, it isn't forced through that smaller channel, which pressurizes it, which helps it pour with more ferocity. Instead, if it's too wide, the tea will sort of just spill out like a waterfall. gushing down the sides of the spout and spilling everywhere. So it's actually more helpful if they're long enough and narrow enough, to a point of course, but it's these two qualities that help the liquid gain pressure and pour faster. This means that the liquid really jettisons out of the spout, and this really helps to avoid things like the spout dribbling or dripping. If you're making these for the first time, another thing I can recommend is throwing them slightly on the thick side if you can't manage to get them thin enough. Then, once they are leather hard and you cut them to shape, you can actually carve away some of the excess material from the outside using a knife. In fact, this is something I still occasionally do, as I also want to try and avoid the spouts feeling very heavy, as ultimately it's extra weight that's being added to the teapot as a whole. And as it's a vessel we're going to be filling up with liquid, which is essentially adding additional weight, you do need to be careful about not crafting a teapot that's really heavy even before any liquid has been added to it. You don't want to end up with something that's so heavy that it's difficult to pour, simply because there's so much additional material in the teapot itself. Throughout the rest of the day, I very carefully let these pieces dry out. I monitor them, and as soon as I can flip them over onto their rims, I do, as normally the undersides are thicker and damper and need more time with air exposed to it for it to dry out properly. When trimming the body and the lid to fit, I need them to be as close in consistency as possible, as it's this that ensures the two parts fit properly throughout the rest of the process. For instance, if the lid is still much wetter than the body, but you still trim it, the wetter component still has to shrink more as compared to the body. This means that even if you trim them to fit, as the components with different consistencies, they then continue to dry at different rates and can actually end up not fitting. As for the spouts, well, I actually want to keep these on the damp side, as it makes attaching them and blending them in flush to the teapot's body so much more straightforward. So I'll keep these covered, like so, essentially pausing the drying process and holding them in this damp state. As for the lids, well, the top sides of these are still really wet, but I don't want their undersides to dry out much further. So I'm going to loosely wrap some plastic around them, this way only the thicker top sides can dry out. And I'll be doing the same thing for the bodies of these teapots. Essentially, I'm wrapping plastic around the portion that's already dried out quite a bit throughout the day, leaving only their damper bases exposed, so they can slowly turn leather hard overnight. Knowing how to dry pots out properly has so much to do with the specific environment you're making pots in. I live in London, where it's often cold and rainy. I can leave pots out like this overnight without worrying about them drying too much, but if you live somewhere much warmer, you might not be able to get away with this. Anyhow, next weekend I'll be assembling these parts and creating a teapot I hope looks something like this. In a way, the assembly is a much more complex process. There are so many important details to cover, which is why I've split up the process, as otherwise this video would probably end up being far too long. Of course, there is one more component we haven't spoken about, the handle. It's the fourth part of the puzzle, arguably. But for the way I make teapots, it's not something I create until everything else has been trimmed and assembled. It's the final step, really, and that's something I'll cover in next week's video. I hope you found this video useful. Teapots are no easy thing to create. They're a culmination, in fact, of many different skills that you gradually learn as a beginner. And I hope this short series sheds some light on the process and makes it more understandable. Thank you as always for taking your time to watch, and I'll see you next week.